What's going on, guys? Today's video is going to be about the film, the A24 film directed by the Safdie brothers and starring Timothée Chalamet, Marty Supreme. Now, this is a film that genuinely blew me away. The first watch, it was like, okay, something's cooking, something's brewing, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't able to put all of these incredible puzzle pieces, and that's what I'm going to call them, puzzle pieces, together, because it was still somewhat cryptic. It was a little bit ambiguous and hard to decipher in that sense, something like The Sopranos. We're going to dive all into that, by the way. But yeah, it was just not something that I was able to figure out right away. But, and then I got the second watch in the movie theaters, and no, man, this is one hell of a movie. I think everybody is sleeping on it. If you don't think you're sleeping on it, I still think you're sleeping on it, because there's a lot going on within this film that isn't just, conservative slop, as some people would put it. Oh, dream big, Marty. Dream big, the American dream. No, it has very little to do with ideas like this. It's a lot more complex. It's a lot more convoluted. It dives into psychology, ambition, what it means to become really, really well. So we're going to break all of that good stuff down. And yeah, hopefully if you're interested, if you watch the movie, definitely make sure to watch the movie before you're watching this. But yeah, if you did watch the movie, stay around. You're going to have a good time. So to cover the structure of the film, which is about becoming, conquering, and actualizing, I have discovered within the film that there's two threads that we see that get really hairy, get really messy, but initially start off pretty clear-cut in the beginning of the film. So let's cover these two threads, what they mean, and the prospects of each. So the emotional appeal of both of these threads. The first thread is Marty Mauser's current reality. Working in a shoe shop, he has no trouble with women, because if he really wanted to marry Rachel, Rachel would leave Ira. He's well supported by his family, in the sense that his uncle can get him a job, and he could live a comfortable, secure life, notwithstanding, any troubles. He is able to continue living in a way where he is sustained, he's good. He's living within the status quo. So that's thread one, the current reality. Thread two is the desired dream. So this thread is Marty aspiring to be a ping pong world champion. That's literally it. It's him aiming to be the best ping pong player in the world, and literally doing anything, whatever it takes, to achieve this dream. Now, when we examine the ontology of both of these threads, we can see that the first thread, thread one, is the thread that most people would take. It's like, why would you go in the 1950s, chase an underdeveloped sport? Like, what's the appeal? Why not just settle down with the girl that you've known since she was very young, work for your family, and, live a comfortable life, have a few kids? Why not do that? And once again, this film is about becoming. That's why it's marketed as dream big. So to segue, the emotional appeal of thread two, and which is the majority of what Marty is doing for the entire film, is chasing his dream, even though all of the institutions around him are attempting to intercept this dream, are attempting to intervene and propel him into the status quo, to being nothing but a shoe shop worker. So the emotional appeal, once again, of thread two is simply just to live freely, to become, to be somebody, And that is what Marty Mauser is doing for the majority of the film. Even if he cannot see, even if he cannot necessarily conceptualize the dream, it is this chasing of an unknown variable X, and the desire that is required, the ambition that you need to propel yourself headfirst into this dream. That is the film. It is these two threads, these two parts of reality, the current reality and the desired dream, almost sort of functioning as parallel lines, And the further you get into the movie, the more ontologically interweaving they get, which is reflected in so many of the film's direction techniques, the thematics, the symbols, the metaphors, which we're all going to get into. But that's the fundamental framework and structural skeleton of the film. You have what is here right now that is comfortable to you. And you also have what could be what is unknown, but it genuinely excites you. It genuinely gets you out of bed, even if the percent of attaining that is only 1%. This is the film in a nutshell, this dilemma. Now we're going to go over some structural tenets, some fundamental tenets that is very important to Marty Mauser's psychology, as it is the driving force of many of his actions. And the one thing I want to sort of bring up as a quote is that the film is very much perceived within Marty's consciousness. And so that's why a lot of it is so chaotic, so claustrophobic. It isn't a film where it looks at these two pieces from the outside, It very much thrusts itself into the desired dream, into thread 2, and shows us the perspective, Marty's perspective from inside himself. That's what makes a lot of these film sequences so exciting and interesting. It's so intense. It's because all of this external environment that we're seeing, even when he's, even smaller things like the honey symbol, which we'll get into later, we are seeing everything in the film through the perspective of Marty Mauser's consciousness. And he has a line for this. He says, "It doesn't even enter my consciousness." That is his response to when Kate is asking him what happens if he won't make it. It's because it's literally not an option. We are living and breathing and perceiving a reality from within a person for the entire duration of the film. So this is just an important structural tenet to remember. Now, a few more tenets that are important to understand so that you can further understand the totality of the film. 1, it is better to succeed in your purpose on your own terms and talent, with emphasis on your terms and talent, than to succeed fraudulently, And this is why when Rockwell wanted him to essentially stage a defeat, Marty did not like that, because it damages his reputation. It moves him away from his ultimate goal. His goal is to become the best ping pong player. It's moving him away from that identity. And it's essentially sneering upon what he desires so ardently in life. This is why Marty Mauser makes fun of Rockwell's son's death when Rockwell says, "You make me laugh, Marty," because he genuinely felt humiliated as he was being belittled of the only thing he has ever yearned for. So achieving something falsely is unfulfilling, even if it gives you so much money. What Marty wants is a complete and total and utter victory, even if only for an instant. He wants to be satiated internally. He wants to have that image of being the best ping pong player in the world externalized. That's the goal. Another thing that I'm a super big fan of is how the film perceives this second thread, the desired dream, because there's almost two diverging perceptions. There's sort of how desperate Marty is to reach somewhere, and we see that from his own perspective, but we also see these objects diverging away from him. And to articulate that sentiment, the film really puts a large emphasis on the invisibility of thread 2, on this desired dream being invisible. We don't really know if Marty's going to succeed or not, right? And all we really have is his belief, his unwavering belief as collateral. There's nothing on the screen from the film itself that proves that it's even a possibility, Like, he spends so much effort to get from place to place to place, but there's no proof of anything. This makes the film a lot more compelling because the invisibility of the dream, of that possibility, and the very real and possibly even, no, I will say, likely failure of his aspiration is what makes all of the risks taken the drama ensuing so compelling. You know, a man's life is slowly crumbling in front of him, and he's actively fighting the worst case scenario over and over and over again. You know, even thread one, the current reality, the opportunities that was given to him if he took the easy way out, gradually as the film unrolls, it crumbles. You know, and I'm going to give examples of that crumbling. Remember when the orange Marty Supreme balls, his innovation, his idea, we had that shot of all of these balls falling. See, if Marty, there's so many different options. If Marty committed to Rockwell's role, he could have been a somewhat successful ping pong player and made a career of himself, but moreover, he could have been a businessman, you know? If Marty committed to the initial idea of the orange balls instead of going to London to play in the British Open, that could have been a genuine business idea and he could have made a lot of money. Instead, we had the shot of these orange Marty Supreme balls crumbling on the floor in the midst of his basically rock bottom when he discovered Rachel's makeup here. But yeah, to get back on track, there's a lot of other examples. His mother's presumed deteriorating health over the film, you know, the fact that he had no housing, no money, the fact that he was possibly even at risk multiple times, his life being at risk, you know, with the possible gangsters at the house where the dog was. So even thread one crumbles. And what makes the film so compelling is that even despite the desired dream, and the further it gets into the aspiration of that desired dream, even with that diverging, what we also get is the initial possibility of his current reality and, you know, essentially settling for less. Even that settling for less eventually diverges and recedes. So Marty Supreme and its representation of both of these possibilities and their relationship with each other, it's just really, 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 really well done. You know, all of his relationships, all of his career opportunities are at jeopardy. He has no money, no housing, and he's still chasing his dream. So that's the situation, and that's the extent to which Marty went to chase his dream. And once again, guys, this video might be messy, but don't worry, I'm going to lay the structure down eventually. I'm going to start with the structural symbols now, but once you get a bigger picture of these threads intermingling, you're going to be able to understand the smaller symbols, and it just all gets more interesting. So starting with the structural symbols, these are symbols that encompass both threads from both his purpose to his full lifespan. So these are symbols that exist throughout the film, throughout his lifespan, and they encapsulate both of his realities. It almost takes a double layer. And we're going to get into that right now. So the first structural symbol is the pregnancy, right? So from the creation symbol we observed at the very beginning, where we literally see the sperm race, this establishes the pursuing of a dream, you know? And what's interesting is that if you remember in the film, it was initially the sperm race winning, but it transforms into a ping pong ball where Marty is thus playing ping pong with Tyler, the creator. I don't remember his in-movie role name, but yeah, he was playing ping pong. So we have two symbols of creation corresponding with reality one, thread one, and thread two. Thread one is pregnancy, you know, it's settling down. Thread two is becoming your actual dream, you know, achieving what you sought out to do for however long you can remember. It is the aspiration and actualization of ping pong world champion. You know, so that's the first symbol. And what's important is that the largest external stake of the film is the pregnancy. That's why the larger Rachel's belly gets, the closer she gets to delivery, the more chaotic the film gets, because his dream is literally shutting down. The opportunities are closing, right? And the second structural symbol is the paddle. This is one that's going to go over a lot of people's heads, but essentially, if you remember, Endo, the Japanese champion, he used a paddle that was unconventional, you know? And that was the paddle with which he dominated Marty during the British Open. Like, I think he won 3-0 in sets. So it was complete domination. Now, I say that this is an internal stake in contrast to the external stake that is a pregnancy, because We don't know if Marty loses because of the paddle or because he's a significantly worse player. You are free to speculate. You are free to draw upon your own conclusions. The film, and intelligently so, because the film mirrors Marty's psyche, the film never really divulges the details of whether the paddle was the reason he won, right? So this is another thing to recognize. The paddle, Marty could have easily told himself, oh, he could have just given up. Oh, I'm not good enough. I might as well settle down. That's why that loss at the British Open should have been so devastating. What does Marty do instead? He leverages it. He says, oh, what do you mean? He's using a false paddle. Why am I using this paddle? He's using that paddle. He is giving himself the confidence to try again, And this is important because it signifies the what ifs, the copes that we tell ourselves in order to show up better in the future. It allows us to maintain our dream intact, even if it just is cope. And this is very important because just as the pregnancy was the external stake, that was the reason he could have stopped playing ping pong. This was the internal stake, where he could have quit, but he never quit. So it's absolutely beautiful how this film operates with two major symbols that represent the entire film, that represent all of the decisions. It's so fascinating to me. So yeah, those are the two symbols. All right, guys, so we've covered a lot so far already. What have we covered so far? We covered the two major structural symbols, that span throughout the film and relate both to the beginning and end as well as his purpose. We talked about the pregnancy, we talked about the paddle. What else did we talk about? We talked about the fundamental tenet. It's better to become within the context of scarcity. It's better to chase than to live a life of security, but you're not happy. It's better to become authentic, because if you're not living a life where you are resonating within your most authentic self, the self might as well be dead. We talked about that. We also talked about structural truths, the fact that thread 2 is mostly invisible. Thread 1, current reality, thread 2, desired dream. Thread 2 is mostly invisible. So how does this all come to play? Because obviously there's a lot going on, but once you really nail down these ideas, the other important part is to recognize how all of these structures and symbols come together to synthesize into the cinematography, the acting, the musical elements. It's the structure in motion, that people will just bypass as, common A24 theatrics. But because the film is so complex structurally, it makes all of the little things, such as the acting, the cinematography, that much more detailed and complex. So once again, yeah, the majority of the art, the beauty in Marty Supreme, comes down to the relationship of these threads, these characters, these symbols and structures, and most significantly, it shows us how these two threads that are filled with everything ultimately interweave and symbolize and synthesize into something more fine, more particular, more delicate as time goes on. The film is literally an entire allegory for creation and how ugly it is. All of the destruction within creation, all of the mess, all of the hairiness within chasing, endeavoring for something. It's 2.5 hours. It's a massive character study of creation. And it's brought to incredible life. So initially, these threads are positioned super, super far away from each other. And once again, we're going to recap all of this. Marty is a shoe salesman. His dream is eons away. There's absolutely no signifier of proximity towards his dream besides his own belief in it. Over time, these threads become closer and closer. Their realities slowly converge. They cause a sort of blissful havoc. We see the moments of humor, we see the moments of drama, of life risk, of even affairs. It represents the chaos of creation. Even the sexual scenes, you see how Marty is, trying to pawn Kate's necklace, and he calls the drain guy to sort of take it out. But yeah, that's what I was talking about before, where it literally, all of this chaos, this indirection, this claustrophobia of character, it's almost like The Sopranos. Like if you've seen The Sopranos, we see all of these thoughts, these actions, and even other characters, their symbols, They're psychological reflections of Marty Mauser's internal being. And simultaneously, Marty's internal elements and components are reflected outwards. It's a ridiculous character study. So we see the world through him, we see it of him, we see the world outside of him, we see it inside of him. There's just so much chaos in motion within this film. It's ridiculous. But let's cover some of the chaos in motion, so I'm not just yapping. First of all, we have the honey scene. So what the honey scene, what it actually represented was an example of selflessness. You know, this person, this guy that was used as a bomb tester during World War II would rub honey all over himself and have his comrades, his people that are suffering with him as prisoners, lick it all off of him. You know, this is a symbol that's very important because Marty sort of subverts this. You know, Marty sees it as an accomplishment of his dream. Marty sees it as the ultimate totality, the representation of attainment, where people are literally looking down on him and he is the source of nourishment. You know, it's his perspective of stardom viewed within himself. You know, and that's the reason why this honey scene and its OST, if you remember the soundtrack, it plays into the sexual scene with Kate. It's almost like he's on top of the world. But what's most interesting about the scene is it also represents the inferiority he feels from chasing the honey. You know, so it's very interesting because he's the honey man. He's the person where other people are nourished by, but also at the same time, he is suffering from chasing the honey, you know, and it relates to his dreams. He has such a grand dream, but he's also a slave to it. So it represents the dynamic, how he's the master and slave of himself, right? So that's one example. Another example of the sort of themes in motion is the escaping from the cop scene. And guys, this is literally one of my favorite scenes in the film. You know, we have Marty's uncle have a police officer sort of fake arrest him. And the uncle is literally threatening him, you know, you can either come work for me, be regular, work at the shoe shop, or you can go to jail, you know? And what do we see? We see Marty say, okay, give me a second, goes into a room, pretends like he's packing his stuff, boom, breaks out of a window, and we see him literally running away from thread 1 and towards thread 2. He's literally chasing his dream, fighting for his dreams, running, jumping, causing chaos, escaping from Rachel, who is now 8 months pregnant, by the way, as we saw. Marty does not have a single clue how he's going to get to his dream. He hasn't a single clue. He's broke. He's effectively homeless now. But there's so much motion, there's so much character, there's so much sincerity in this chasing towards an object that he doesn't even know exists. There's monumental amounts of humanity within this chase, where he's literally running away from his reality and chasing a dream, where he's trying to stack that $1,500 up, which, by the way, is a lot more money than it means today, because the movie is set in the 1950s. So why? Why does he have to do this? So he can pay the bill, and play in the World Championships, all because of that. The whole way the film was shot in that whole escape sequence, you know, to the perspectives it uses, even to the soundtracks. Go on Spotify right now, listen to the Apple. It's an incredibly romantic soundtrack. It's such a ridiculous scene. But yeah, this is another example, you know, where the structure, the symbols, it's all just in motion and comes together to form a much stronger, more empowering, holistic element and becomes something transcendent. So those are two of my favorite scenes in the film right there. The honey scene, but especially the escaping from cops scene. Now there are more examples of, you know, Marty's fascinating psyche and these components in motion within his consciousness, and that being the film. But we're not going to talk about all of them, you know. Just to, you know, spur your memory, Think about the first run-in with a gangster where he almost got killed by a shotgun, you know? That's an example. But what you need to know is that as the film progresses, Thread 1 is gradually winning the metaphysical war. As the film goes on, Marty becomes more humiliated, probably more doubtful, and more restricted in opportunity. It's almost like his authenticity is slipping away from him. And, you know, Thread 2 is somewhat barely holding on for the film. You know, his dreams are sort of just there, but they're in a different universe. And a lot of these doors are just spontaneously opening, and this is one of my favorite details of the film. There's so much unconsciousness coming into this whirlwind of consciousness. A lot of accidents are happening just because he didn't quit, right? Let me name some of these. Staying at the Ritz-Carlton because he believed it. He talked to the president of the Ping Pong Association. He's like, I deserve this. What do you mean? I'm the next American superstar. We don't know how. Maybe that's how the $1,500 bill came up, you know, because he just kind of snuck into one of the rooms. We're not really shown why, but Marty believing that he deserves something and the sheer willpower into his dreams and that he'll achieve it. It's one of the reasons why he just kept going and going. He lied his way into his reality. He was staying at the Ritz-Carlton. He somehow slept with Kate Stone because he impressed her enough, you know? The opportunities with Rockwell uncovered. You know, he was just bullshitting his way at the dinner, you know? Oh, come watch me play, you know? You could have an inspiration for your pen idea, you know? And another detail on top of this is that Marty is always choosing the best path that will support him at that specific time, even if it's something he rejected. And this is one of the great evidences within the film that Thread 1 is winning the metaphysical war. Because he rejected certain things because it didn't fit his character or label at the time, but he picked that back up later on. What are examples of this? Initially, he didn't want to play for the Globetrotters halftime shows because it made him somewhat sort of a mascot, right? But after Rockwell rejected him because he made fun of his son, we see a whole section with an iconic song playing. I can't remember what it was, but he's literally, you know, sort of humiliating himself, making audiences laugh as a showsman as opposed to a professional athlete, you know, playing with a seal. That's an example. You know, going back to Rockwell is another example where he snuck into the party after Kate Stone's theatrical premiere. And he literally gets his ass whooped, you know, with a paddle in front of people, just so that will give him the opportunity of getting on the plane, possibly getting on the plane. Remember when Rockwell said, "You have no power here"? So it was literally a gamble as well. Not only did he humiliate himself, but he humiliated himself with the possibility that he would not even achieve, didn't even have a chance to achieve his dream, play Endo. So yeah, whether it's hitchhiking, you know, or staying somewhere, procuring money, he somehow always found a way. He's following Thread 2 so finely, so particularly, so closely to the point where even though there is nothing there, he somehow always found a way, you know? He's literally manifesting a reality. You know, he's playing a visual novel where he's following a direct route. The only thing is he doesn't even know if that route is there. That was the power of his belief, and that's how chaotic the film was. So, super fascinating stuff. And yeah, this is one of my favorite details and structural truths throughout the film. Let's talk about the climax now. We have a really, really good fundamental understanding of the film, guys. We established the fact that there's two distinct threads, two distinct realities. We talked about different symbols. We talked about the fact that they started off far and the threads slowly move closer and closer together. We also talked about the fact that over time, it feels as though Thread 1 is winning. There's a lot that we've covered, which is great. Now, for the climax. Marty somehow gets humiliated, and Rockwell decides, hey, you know, what the hell? You know, this guy's literally begging me. I hit him with a paddle. I might as well take him to Tokyo to conduct my ad, to be a character. Now, the crucial thing to recognize is that Marty is humiliating himself here, but only so that he gets paid and he gets to play in the World Championships. That's why. You know, he isn't interested in making the money to use for himself, to have Rockwell as a great business partner in the future. His goal is that this will move him closer to the World Championships. That's it. So Marty has nothing and nobody now. You know, the literal day before he goes on the flight, you know, his girl got shot. Rachel got shot and she's in the hospital. And Marty's risking his authenticity, you know, believing that eventually he'll be able to redeem himself at the World Championships, right? So he gets to Japan. Now there's this crucial encounter with the table tennis president that changes his mindset and just decides, you know what, I don't care about anything. I'm here to play right here, right now, you know? And that in exchange is Marty asking the table tennis president, you know, please redo the brackets. You know, I worked so hard to get here. Why can't you just help me out? And he was like, he said something along the lines of, do you know what I had to do to get to Japan? And the president says, you haven't come far enough. Marty says, look how far I came, you know, literally pouring the soul out. And the president says, you haven't come far enough. Too bad, you know. And so now what is Marty going to do? Go and humiliate himself as well? No. So this changes his whole strategy. This, along with the fact that Rockwell planned a surprise humiliation ritual where the loser has to kiss a pig. Yeah, because we never saw that in the agreement terms. It was not a part of the agreement. So not only did Marty lose his chance at truly becoming world champion officially, he also now has to partake in this humiliation ritual, which is very likely to happen simply off of the fact that Endo is a better table tennis player than him, as we have seen so far. So what does Marty do? He interrupts the theatrics. After he loses, he pleads for a real match with Endo. And this final climax, guys, this final match is so cathartic because the stakes were never higher, you know? Marty's risking everything. He's playing the world champion for real, an opponent that he has already lost to. He's unprepared. He's risking genuine legal trouble with the table tennis president as well as the Rockwell Corporation. Once again, he traveled to Japan after his childhood friend got shot. Even the baby's health is left somewhat abstract. He's in a country where he doesn't speak its language. He's in enemy territory. It's quite literally a Game 7 in the most oppressive circumstances imaginable. He's quite literally in his work clothes from the first scene, symbolizing how close he is to going back to being a nobody, because that's what it is. It's all or nothing here, guys. And you know what's important, guys? The fact that Endo is playing with the exact same paddle. So he has that mental hurdle to overcome as well. On top of everything else, it's an unbelievable setup for a climax, you know? So, you know, they play. It's so intense, so chaotic. We're literally all on the edges of our seats. All or nothing, an entire gamble on the self. You know, risking to become someone for real, to be your most pure, authentic self. He gets a match. And in a thriller, guys, he wins the match. He conquers Endo, playing with the same style of paddle once again. And the exact moment where he wins, guys, and he falls to the floor, hands at his eyes, and that success soundtrack comes on, it's one of the most cathartic films in film that I've ever seen. It's literally, I was on the verge of tears, guys, because through all of the chaos, all of the struggles, all of the disbelief, all of the haters, the doubters, yada, 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 he took a risk. The story is about a man taking a gamble on himself, on desiring to become someone, and it all paid off. Even if only momentarily, Marty Mauser became a man. You know, there's this saying in NBA circles, are you a man or a mouse? You know, who are you? Show me who you are. Marty showed that he was a man. He exalted the purpose of his consciousness. Even if he wasn't recognized, and he won't be recognized by the world, because he's not allowed to play in the World Championships. He beat Endo, the world champion, fair and square, in the most oppressive circumstances possible. He achieved the unachievable within the already achievable. Within the already unachievable. It was literally all odds against him, and he succeeded, guys. So that was enough for him. That was the moment, his life, purpose, the reasoning for his being, Marty, the supreme within Marty Supreme. It was never about being a capitalistic superhero, guys. You need to understand this. It was never about being someone crazy. It was about living within your own most human means that you wished for. It was about embracing and becoming the Marty Mauser that he was internally, that the world endlessly rejected. And sure, it has conservative moments here and there in terms of how Marty acts. But this, at heart, guys, it's a very progressive film in terms of opening up possibilities that we didn't think was open to us through sheer determination and will, through becoming the best version of ourselves. So that's the climax for y'all, man. One of my favorite climaxes of all time in film. Sensational. Now, we're going to talk about the conclusion and how everything wraps up, guys. So, the most important detail, and I know this is going to go over a lot of people's heads, but the most important detail of the film is that Rachel was due for birth in 4 weeks before Marty left. Tell me why the baby spontaneously, somehow, was under delivery the exact same day Marty achieved his purpose. Think about the implications there. Juxtapose that with the initial goal of creation, where we see the sperm transform into a ping pong ball. Really think about this, guys. You want to hear my interpretation? It's an intentional allegory. Just as the paddle was the internal stake testing Marty's resilience and his belief, the external stake throughout the film was the baby itself. It was the possibility of creation. It was a representation of the accomplishment of his purpose, which is why it gets delivered the exact same day that Marty achieves it. This is also another detail that's really interesting, because if Marty somehow didn't get to Tokyo, guys, it would have been cooked, right? The baby would have been born. He would have possibly had to just take care of the baby, become a regular person. Now that he achieved it, even if it is not recognized, nothing is recognized, Marty steps up and says that the baby is his. Whether it's his or not, we don't know. Ultimately, nothing really changed, He's not officially a world champion. He's back in New York dead broke. He's probably going to be a sales shoe shop worker for the rest of his foreseeable future. It's okay. The moment that we see Marty see the baby and accept it, it's a visualization of his purpose. The moment that he beat Endo. To the point where even if the baby is Ira's, it's his too in that internal sense. It represents what he became. So it's this idea of an internal eternity, guys, and that identity mattering more than what actually is. It's this final colossal idea that what we choose to be and the accomplishment of that in our most abstract sense is more important than reality, It's this idea of thread 1, the current reality, and thread 2, the desired dream. They're merging, and they're becoming one. They're completing who Marty is. He can now go live a regular life because he became a Marty Mauser, because he accomplished his purpose, his personhood, because he experienced his true authenticity without any doubt. The life begins with the song Forever Young. Forever young, you know what that song's about. It's this idea of birth, This is a song we see played during the sperm race. Birth, formation. It's allegorizing the possibility of creation. We see the egg, once again, transform into a ping pong ball. Sperm or egg, I don't remember, but proponents of creation nonetheless. The song ends with "Everybody wants to rule the world." Particularly, it starts with the lyrics, "Welcome to your life, there's no turning back." It represents closure, the finality of creation, his ultimate masterpiece, his accomplished purpose, the finality of his becoming, where he cries over what he has created, even if it may not be real, even if it's Ira's, even if he's not a real world champion, even if it's Ira's. He cried over the actualization of his purpose and what it took to get to this moment. He's a father of a baby, but he's also a father of his dreams, of his purpose. Once again, whatever happens after this is free game. He gets sued by the Rockwells. The movie intentionally leaves the negative effects of the thread, both thread 1 and thread 2. It leaves it open-ended because whatever happens after this moment, it doesn't matter. This is the film least deserving of a sequel in history because it's so complete. Whatever happens, whether he gets sued by the Rockwells, gets hunted and killed down by the gangster, gets trapped in a marriage he hates, is forced to sell shoes for the rest of his life. The instant that Marty saw the baby, his most essential self, his primordial purpose, it was achieved for eternity. So that's the film Marty Mauser, the story of the conceptualization and the finality of creation, told within an innumerable amount of obstacles to get there, divided between thread 1 and thread 2, intermingling, going all over the place, with some of the best soundtracks ever for a film, especially relative to the film's thematics, with so many structural and symbols and details, with some of the most compelling acting performances, specifically Chalamet, he killed it. It was a ridiculous performance, but also the Rockwell guy, he killed it as well. So shout out to him. But that's the story, that's the film of Marty Mauser, guys. You know, it's this idea of becoming, and I hope I did a good job of, breaking down its most essential parts. There's going to be a lot of other details that I didn't cover, but the bare bones, a lot of the structural details, the direction of the film, it's fascinating, it's invigorating, it's inspiring to me, and what can I say, guys? Yeah, this is simply one of my favorite films of all time. Currently, I have it at number 4 all time. I loved everything about it. The soundtrack, analytical components aside, the soundtrack, the drama, the humor, it's all ridiculous to me, man. It was just so good. And yeah, how good is the meta element of the story? The story is literally based on a true story. Marty Mauser was inspired after a genuine real person. That's a meta element that adds to the film because this idea of his dreams inspired a A24, a big, large picture creation, and that goes on to inspire more people. So it just further validates, guys, the emotions and the reality of the film really well. But yeah, that's Marty Mauser. That's my analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Smaller things, I don't have the best production. My lights went off mid-shoot. I don't got no background, but hopefully the camera quality was better. I hope the mic quality was good. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed for real. Let me know if you guys have any interpretations below, what you thought about the video. I just like talking in front of a camera, guys. I have a lot of thoughts and I want to get it out today. So Marty Supreme, one of my favorite films of all time. Dream big.